What's a Gallinipper? Gallinipper Cove was the name my father came up with for our family's jungle retreat on Gatun Lake in the former Panama Canal Zone. The lake is essentially a freshwater bridge across the Continental Divide that ships use to get from one ocean to the other. The lake is fresh water fed by the Chagres River that flows out of the jungles of Panama, and it's full of fish, crocodiles, caiman, and very wild animals, otherwise known as Gallinippers. This shot is an overview of where Gallinipper Cove was situated, where my dad and I went fishing for the first time, and Ken's Island. Just as a side note, even wasps can be Gallinippers. Keep that in mind. The lake was once the largest man-made lake on Earth until the Aswan Dam was built in Egypt. The jungles extend right to the edge of the lake, and the water is always a bit murky due to ship traffic and heavy rains. As a young kid, my Sunday school teacher, Ken Manthorn, used to take us up to his island about 5 miles north of Gamboa. In those days, you could lease an island or a point of land on a peninsula for $12 a year. The local natives would clean it off, build a bohio, and take care of it for about $20 a month, if that. I guess I was about 13 at that time. By the time I was 14, I had my own 12-foot aluminum boat with a 6-horsepower Johnson, and my friends and I would all take our little boats up to Ken's Island for the weekend to camp and have fun. We were responsible kids. Our parents didn't even require an adult to be with us after the first year or so, even when Ken didn't go with us. We never drank alcohol until we were much older, but we would always take guns and we'd catch crocs at night with our bare hands using flashlights from the front of our boats. Responsible, but still a little crazy. My dad was not a fisherman. He didn't like the water. I'm sure he could swim, but I never saw him in a bathing suit, and I only saw him in the water once in my life, which is where this story is headed. Kurt was a hunter. Every Saturday, he and his pals would hunt the small white-tailed deer that were everywhere in the jungles of Panama. Mom took us to church on Sunday, and Dad usually made it a point to stay home with the family that day. But we all knew he was bored. So one day I suggested he go fishing with me. I'll get to that shortly. The peacock bass that were introduced in the 60s had spread all over the lake by then, and they were voracious feeders. We used white lead-headed feathers to catch them. It was easy, fast fishing every time, and boy did those bass fight hard. Still do. To my delight, my dad finally agreed to go with me, and that's how Gallinipper Cove began. But before I tell you about that first time fishing, let me tell you a little more about Gallinipper Cove. Kurt loved building things. I'm sure that's where I got it from too. Nothing is more rewarding than taking a raw piece of land and creating a safe haven, a fort, to spend time in the wild with your friends. In my dad's case, it was with our family. My dad quickly figured out that if he had an island like Ken Manthorn's, Mom would absolutely love it, and she did. He loved pleasing her. Here are some photos of the place he built after our first fishing trip. These shots are from the water looking up at the bohio, taken sometime in the early 70s. That's my dad, my mom in red, and probably Tutty Mallory with her husband Bill taking the picture. Here's the same shot taken a year earlier with my girlfriend Janice and me. What a wonderful time that was. As I said earlier, we had locals build the bohio and take care of the place. Here's Augustine and his son. I introduced them to Dad after having met them years earlier at Ken's Island. When my dad left the Canal Zone in 1977, he gave my beloved Remington Bolt Action 22 to Augustine. I'll bet it's still in their family, shooting just fine. And that's the same rifle Don shot the pigeon out of the air with in another story. And here's my sister Twyla, fishing from the same working dock that Augustine made before my dad had the big one built and towed up the lake. No one would even think of sitting with their legs dangling over the side like this now. Too many crocs these days. Big ones too. Gallinippers. Here are a couple of shots of my dad cooking, and then my mom and him sitting down to eat under the bohio. Even the dogs went to the lake. The sun is so bright you can't see it, but that's the Panama Canal in the distance, just beyond their table. So now it's time to tell you about the first time my dad and I went fishing. It's also the first time I ever saw him in the water. After several years of bringing home large quantities of fish, I finally convinced my dad to go fishing with me. We went up the canal to some of the bays, which are completely surrounded by jungle, and caught dozens of huge bass. Here we are moving into a perfect fishing hole in the side of the jungle. As the day was ending, my father made one last cast towards the shoreline. You'll see why it was his last cast shortly. He accidentally hooked some bushes overhanging the water's edge, and more. True to form, he snatched at the line, hoping to free it from the foliage. About that time, we both saw a huge wasp nest hit the water at the end of his line. I immediately dived into the water. When I surfaced from the lake, I could not see my father anywhere and became momentarily worried. But then I saw his hand holding his wallet just out of the water as he lay submerged beneath the surface in safety. At long at last, I had finally seen my dad swim. This was our first fishing trip, and the one that inspired my dad to create Gallinipper Cove. In closing, the picture below is perhaps my most favorite of all. There aren't many photos of my whole family all together, much less having fun at some crazy place called Gallinipper Cove in a faraway country called Panama. Don had lived through Vietnam, and I had just finished college at NC State. Beth had just survived a car wreck that she would suffer from for the rest of her life. Twyla was about to get married and hadn't even met her husband yet. Kurt was about to bury his mother, our only living grandparent. And Mom would die the very next year. None of us knew how momentous this fun little day at the lake would become. In fact, this picture was only discovered in April of 2025. 50 years later, when I finally processed a huge box of slides Twyla had given me a decade earlier. I'm sure this is the last photo of our whole family together. Only Twyla, Beth, and I remained. End of story. But now you know what a damn gallinipper is.